Hi, I'm Randy Blalock, and thank you for coming by and dropping by to visit my webpage. I'm here today to kind of talk a little bit about my book, The Many Walks of Life, and my upcoming book, The Man in the Dugout. Well, my book, The Many Walks of Life, is a fictional story. It is based on people, places, and things that I knew, people that I knew when I was growing up in southeast Atlanta. But the story is a fictional story, and so there are many instances in there where I recall things that happened to me in my childhood and in my youth, but it is based on a fictional story, and so I've always kind of rankled up just a little bit when it's called a personal memoir, because it to me does not fit in that category. Absolutely. There's a good bit of fiction, and that's been one of the fun things, is for people who have known me all of my life and grew up with me to have them kind of guess what was the fictional stories and which were the ones that really did happen. Well, it's the story about a man who is going through a personal life crisis, a medical crisis in his life, that is causing him to think back on the people, places, and things that have taken him to the point where he is today at that point in his life. So it was a very personal story of this character and his many walks of life that he had taken up to that point in his life. Most of the book takes place in southeast Atlanta, near I-20 and Glenwood exits. For those of you who may be familiar with that particular part of town, that's the area of town that I grew up in. It saw dramatic change over the years that I lived there, but it does encompass from the characters' probably teenage years up until the present time. Which was, I completed the book in 2015, so up until that point in the character's life. Well, it covers the 50s, 60s, 70s, and does broach into the 80s and 90s, and again, current day as well, but a lot of its primary focus takes place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Well, a lot of the compliments that have been made from people that I did grow up with, who are mentioned in the book only by first name basis only, they've said that it was so great to have them recall those same places that I mentioned in the book. But I'm hopeful that for the person, let's just say, living in Michigan who reads this book, it'll make them think about those locales, those people that were instrumental to them in forming them to the point of where they are in their current lives now. But I think I'm a nostalgia freak, so I think it's good to look back at the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because even though they were turbulent times, those of us who lived through that era have just mostly fond memories of that time. So I'm hopeful that the reader will feel that way too. One of the best compliments that I've been given about this book is that it's like having a personal conversation with the author, and that's always been very, very an important review of the book for me, because that's how I wanted it to come across. Well, ironically, it was a walk that I took. I am a Civil War buff. I've always loved that part of our history, as tragic as it was, and grew up in an area of southeast Atlanta where the Civil War, the Battle of Atlanta, had a very prominent start. The first shots that were fired during that momentous day on July 14, 1864, occurred no more than about 200 to 300 yards from my house where I grew up. There's still, of course, a plaque there today, a memorial plaque that notes that the first shots were fired. So as a young boy, I found artifacts all the time of Civil War, and it just instilled in me an interest. And so on July 14, 2014, I decided to retrace the steps of the Confederate soldiers that day, knowing that their paths would take me back to many of the places that I knew as a child growing up, back to my old elementary school, back to my high school, back to areas that were very prominent around where I grew up. So as I was taking that walk that day, and I came to my house, the house that I grew up in, and saw the difference that it was now from what my mind's eye recalled it to be. It made me think, you know, we come a long way in our lives, and we take different pathways and different steps, and that's really what started the thought process. Well, surprisingly, I began very soon after that July walk, actually sitting down and then putting the outline and the structure together a little bit. The answer to that is probably from July of 2014, and I finished the book in March of 2015. So really about a 7 or 8 month process. Well, I think probably the most interesting things about me have been written in the bio. I am a native Atlantan, which is somewhat unique, even though we live in a suburb of Atlanta now, some 70 miles to the northeast of us. Atlanta, southeast Atlanta, still are my roots. That's where I grew up. That's the area of town that I recall so fondly and so vividly. I do love sports. I'm a trivia nut. As I do say in some of the bios, people who know me and know me well know not to call between 7:30 and 8 o'clock every night, because I'm watching Jeopardy, and nothing's going to interrupt with my Jeopardy watching. So that's another little bit about me. I'm a self-acclaimed couch potato, watch too much TV, but I've always enjoyed it. Growing up an only child, that was my entertainment, was TV, and so it's carried forward even to my adult years, maybe to the extreme too much sometimes. But I do love sports. I love watching both on TV and going to games in person. So those are the main things that I would say. Although I do have to add, my wife and I are members of Winder First United Methodist Church here in Winder, and we truly love our Lord, and I am an adult Sunday school teacher, and have done that for the last 14 years. And one of the other things I'm very proud about is also for the last 12 years now, I have led our 11 o'clock Christmas Eve candlelighting service as the lay pastor for that service, and it's just a joy, and it's just a blessing that I just really love having each year come around to that time, because it's a special night, special time, and it's a small way that I can give back to my Lord the many blessings that He's given me.